Welcome to a windswept edition of the program from Brancaster Sands at the top of Norfolk, which is the first of the semi-finals of the series.
All is not what it seems. I've taken the day off from tomorrow's will to help out. Now, Heinz Wolff and his guest judge Ian Fells think that they're rehearsing the top of the programme. But as you're about to see, they're in for a surprise.
We want you to make a vehicle, and using 3 of these. It is an inflatable wheel, chosen because it can float.
Okay, let's stop it there.
Now watch again.
Okay, Beach, we are now recording. This will be recording 1 of the day. Stand by, please.
Welcome to this windswept edition of the program from Brancaster Sands at the top of Norfolk, which will be the first of the semi-finals of the series. All our teams will have won a previous program, so we expect particularly good results this time. But first, let my guest judge, Professor Ian Fells, set the problem. Ian.
In essence, teams, we want you to make a vehicle, but using 3 of these.
Are you sure you want 3 of these, Ian?
You might well look surprised, and that's the smallest dressing room I've ever been in. But there's been a change of plan. Now, don't worry about it, because
Yes.
we're not going to be doing the problem that you've been setting up. It's actually a very different one, and it actually involves another team. And guess what?
What?
Yourself and Heinz are going to be part of that team.
How splendid.
You fancy that, do you?
Well, we
So
shall
if Heinz
see.
and would like to come over. Here are your competitors' sweatshirts. There we are.
Thank you.
The 2 of you. If you'd like to go and join the other 2 teams over there, and I'm not going to leave you alone. You do have a 3rd member, and it is in fact an old friend of the series, Michael French.
Good gracious me.
So if you'd like to go over
Yes,
to
I will join the team.
the competitors. It's a complete turnaround, and here comes Michael French to join you. Over there, if you would, Michael. And so the guest judge today is in fact going to be Professor Meredith Thring, and he's going to be guiding me through the whole of today's problem. How do you do?
How do you do?
What is the problem actually going to be then?
Well, it's a greasy pole. You know the greasy pole that they have on ships when they have to knock each other off, sitting astride the pole, and the one who's knocked off falls into the sea or into the swimming pool.
That sounds fun.
Well, this is the same thing as that, except that it's a mechanical it's a mechanical person you've got to build, and it must stick 18 inches above the pole rigidly, and not more than 4.5 inches below the pole. And it mustn't weigh more than 10 pounds. I've given you all those in British units.
Okay. Is that all clear then? If I was given that problem, I'd be on the first train straight back home. So you better get cracking with it, I think. As these semi-finalists are going down, let me tell you who they are. The winners of our watery heat here at Brancaster were Emergency Exit Arts, who succeeded in raising a flag to the top of a pole by harnessing the power of waves and tide. They're a company of versatile performers, prop and puppet makers for all kinds of theatrical events. Les Sharp is an inventor of mechanical sculptures, and a clown and a dancer. All those could be useful to him today. Alison Wood specialises in bamboo model making and plays the accordion and trombone. Andy Plant devised the famous mechanical water clock in Covent Garden and plays the double bass. And his team complain that he's always on a big fiddle. Cancer and Polio Research Fund won their heat from the cold, so to speak, distilling the most pure water from seawater by adapting the workings of a fridge. John Eveson organises fundraising for the Cancer and Polio Research Fund in Oxford. Paul Sower is an engineer turned taxman, popular fellow, and he and Graham Wotton, who's a self-employed builder, are both members of the Territorial Army.
Whatever way we're going to drive it. I think you're going to have to pull it from the front and just let it overrun on the back pulley. Because if we have to ram him, we can pull it back and then ram him. If our gun don't work, right, we can smash him off. Right?
Fosters from Lichfield won in our first programme, where their task was to build the world's largest paper aeroplane. Graham Foster runs 2 shops, one dealing in electronics and computers, and the other in what else but fancy dress costumes. David Broom lectures in photography in the local college and works part-time with Graham servicing electronics. Andrew Barkus is a draftsman and student of building studies. Also good assets to have on your side.
You've got to have some means of gripping the pole, but, so that it won't, because the point is that when it swings, the thing's going to roll over anyway. It's tend to roll over anyway.
Especially with it stopping and starting all the time.
Yeah, so it's got to clamp good and tight. So that's the bit that we've got to make the firm bit on.
Yeah.
The hinge on that, I noticed we've got a wheel, trolley wheel in there, which is not a nice bearing on it. So that'll give us a lot of sweep on it. It's just attaching a vertical piece to that. Drills, I don't know if we use the hand drill, even if we haven't got the other one. And the pole, it's rather large, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll have to go and measure it. We'll go and measure it in a minute.
Yeah. Well, before we take a look at our fourth team, we should make one thing perfectly clear. This is definitely a one-off event for them, and even if they win, there's no way we're going to let them go through to the final. That's a privilege that will go to one of the other three teams. Well, let's have a listen in and see how our professors are getting on.
That any of the blows are going to be vicious enough, having denied us gunpowder.
Well, I think gunpowder would have been the thing, and we would have had the whole thing blown straight off. I wonder if we could make something pretty inflammable. We could use the...
Greek fire.
Well, no, I mean, there's a can of gas under there. I reckon we can have that and burn the whole thing straight off at the front.
I'm not sure that burning it up is knocking it off. Knocking it off in the sense...
I should have thought burnt up is knocked off.
I would have thought, I mean, if you do this semantically, knocking off means stealing it. They clearly don't mean that.
Well, I must say these rules have been very loosely arranged.
Physical displacement is one of the possibilities.
But anyway, the way we're going to do it, really, is with a rotating shaft that's going to push the whole thing up.
Traction drive.
And this has really got to cling onto the wood. It's got to push the whole thing along.
But I mean, I'm sure that everybody else will be thinking about this as well. But if we made our device in such a way that it encircles the pole completely, it would be unknock-offable.
Yes, I think that they've already realised that that is a mistake in the rules.
But there has already been the First Amendment has been issued.
But the one that they have not thought of, as far as we can see, is that if we...
Well, perhaps you ought not to test it.
No, I don't. No. I think we won't actually talk about that in case somebody overhears us, because I think otherwise I'd change the rules again. So we'll stick with the rules as we understand them, and a device which it will be very difficult for anybody else to hit. Yes, that's the plan.
We make a dodge, you mean?
Well, Meredith, it's a fiendishly tricky problem that you've set for them today. Just remind us again about all the rules and regulations for the contest.
Yes, it is tricky, but it's a very nice piece of engineering design. Each team has to stand beyond the end of the pole. They mustn't walk past it. They've got to make their machine drive along up to the middle, and then the other one comes up, and then they've got to knock each other off.
And it's got to be mechanical as well, has it?
It's got to be mechanical, yes. It's got to be worked from the end so that theirs stays on and the other one is knocked into the sea.
Well, they're going to have to work hard, and they're going to have to work quickly, because the tide is going to be rushing in here in a few hours' time, straight up this beach, and totally submerge the area below the pole, which of course means that the teams will be operating their machines standing waist-high in water. Well, Meredith, what would your advice be to them, apart from cutting their losses and quitting?
Oh no, I think they have great fun working out really intelligent engineering solution. And I think that every team has a good chance of winning. The only trouble is when they knock the other chap off, they probably knock themselves off at the same time.
Well, when all the machines are ready, there's going to be a knockout contest. Red will play yellow, or blue will play grey, and the winners of those two will then go to a grand final to see whose machine stands up to the test. But let's now go along the line and see how they're all getting on. Come on. I'll go have a look at red team. Dave, well, it's looking fairly robust, but what is it?
It's a saddle to ride along the pole, and it's going to be powered along by this pulley wheel at the top here, and hopefully it will slide along.
So these are the stabilisers?
Right, yes, they're going to go down the side. They're made out of, hardboard, chipboard top, and some reinforcing devices in it made out of 2x2.
Looks as though there's some good design thinking gone into that. Graham, come and show me on the board exactly how you've arrived at that particular design. How's it come about?
Basically the design there is you've got the hardboard either side, the chipboard across, and the wheel in the middle. The thing that you probably couldn't see very well is underneath there's a couple of pieces of 2x2 angled off, which are a bit more explicit there. Each one's drilled out, and inside that is a spring under tension, compression, sorry, with a pin on the end of it. held back by a metal plate going right the way across the top. So hence they're along there. Then when it's in position, we will withdraw the metal protection and the pins should fire down into the pole and retain it in the place. We then have a pivot system on the top with a crossbar there, these two push rods, and the vertical there. We have yet to attach the ballast at the top to sort of swing round and hit the component.
I love this idea, particularly good. I like the idea of firing pins into the log. How are you going to get it into the middle in the first place, quickly?
Basically, it's going to be tightened around there with a piece of string which we'll pull back and it'll go there. Then we'll fire it when it's in position. Bit dangerous that, the pins are flying about a bit at the moment.
How confident are you?
Well, at this stage, not very.
Not very? Looks like a good idea, certainly better than I could ever do. Meredith, the red team have got some great ideas. How are the yellow team getting on?
Yes, the yellow team are doing very well also. That's going to be very ingenious. Now tell me about it.
We have got the basic trolley ready now. We're just about to test it on the pole. We've gone for a spiked roller drive. The teeth here which will dig very firmly and securely into the log. The other 5 rollers are simply free weeding rollers which just give stability and help it run along. And if that trial does come up all right, which we hope it will in a moment, we're then going to go for our actual destructor mechanism, which with this frame giving us the required height of the machine, we're then going to use 2 levers, a short one and a long one. There will in fact be a small shovel arrangement at the front of each lever. The idea being that will locate under the opposing machine, and the first operator will still be driving the machine forward, and the second operator will then pull the small lever up first to get the opposing machine lifted, and as soon as that's done, the larger lever, which then will allow us to walk right under the machine, lifting it up as we go until such time that it topples backwards or slides off sideways.
Well, of course, there's one problem you've got, that you're pulling backwards with your chain in order to drive it forwards. You've got to rely on very good friction to pull it against the pull of the chain.
I think with the pins that we have in the roller, there's plenty of friction, and there is an added advantage that, in fact, that downward pull at the bottom is going to help the pins bite even more so into the wood. With the other bonus that on the way back we can really whiz along.
Yes, well, at least you're not like the tanks that Leonardo da Vinci tried, when the men turned the handle and the front wheels went backwards and the back wheels went forwards. So you're a lot better than that.
Oh,
well,
we've ironed that out. We've only got 1 driven wheel, no problem.
Well, I wish you luck.
Thank you very much. Right. Let's go and do the test.
I'm going to go in 1 minute. Yeah. So I think if we do this, right, tighten it up a bit more, the system, right? And you wanted a bit more weight, didn't you, on the bottom?
Yeah, if we've got any weight spare,
well, actually, well, that's the point. Let's weigh these.
Well, if you weigh them 2 items
we've
there.
got 8 pounds here. 8 pounds. Now let's see if we can get all this balanced.
That's another
Right.
2 1/4 pounds.
So you're over.
8 cents. Right. Well, we're just over.
Always chop a bit off somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to reduce the weight of that back structure. Have to do it in inch by inch timber.
Well, not necessarily. We can probably just run.
Yeah, but
I don't think an inch by inch. You've got to lift 10 pounds, don't forget, on the opposing machine. Inch by inch. I don't think it's going to.
Well, we have to use it.
Put a little strap of aluminium over
Oh,
there.
right, okay.
Well, now,
Yeah.
tell me how you started to think about this problem.
Oh, yes. Well, in this diagram, this is the pole, the greasy pole, and this is the body of the machine. And what we thought was we put a hinge mechanism with a claw at one end, which would drag this along. But we thought that might be too vulnerable for to attack, out on a limb, as it were. So we decided to make something much more flush to the pole, a kind of a system of runners, which...
Well, now, tell me about that.
Well, we thought we'd then go on to the Fred Flintstone method, which is much more crude. It's based on the idea of cross-country skis, which allow forward movement, but as soon as you try and push off with one leg, the ski digs in. So we've reproduced that with nails that are angled backwards, and you have a dual movement, so that when one section is freely moving forwards, the other 2 side sections are digging in, and vice versa when you allow the spring to pull the central section backwards, which means that the whole frame moves forwards, one either side. and there'll be 2 large springs, hopefully, to clamp it onto the side of the log.
But are you relying on the spring during the forward movement?
No, we are at the moment. If the spring isn't sufficient, then we'll attach a second rope to do the same job as the spring.
Good.
The thing I've been thinking about is whether we can use a ram under one side, only very little time, and then have a lever on the ram so you can pull it some more.
So once you've got it partly up, then we pull it sideways. Well, I think we use the ram straight.
Right, gentlemen, let's see how you're getting on. Heinz, have you recovered yet from the shock of being entered into the competitive fray?
Not entirely. We were psychologically totally unprepared for this. I must say the surprise was total. So, of course, in the good or bad old days, the judges actually used to make things. And I still vividly remember making a self-propelled salami in one of our food programs. But we are making some reasonable, even if perhaps not totally imaginative progress.
Well, it looks like a beautiful piece of carpentry. Could you just hold it up for us?
Yes.
Very nice.
Let me take this, only this has no function.
Is this the first idea that you came up with, Ian? Or?
Well, no. We started off with a very engineeringly satisfactory device which had 2 toothed rollers set like that, almost like knees, you see,
yes.
which fitted either side of the log, and we were going to drive those using a hand drill. We could arrange the drive to come out at right angles. Pretty good, we thought.
Clever.
But then we remembered to ourselves that these rather complex devices very frequently fail, so we decided to settle for simplicity as a result of many years of experience. It may turn out not to be right, but
well,
that's the way it is.
You never know. Let's see. So talk us through this, Heinz. Exactly what have we got there?
Well, the pole is so here. It's like the rump of a horse, or the greasy pole. We have a spiked roller at the front here.
Yeah, looks nasty.
The spiked roller is held in contact with the pole merely by the weight of the machine, which is about 10 pounds. By putting a string here, the spiked roller will be made to rotate.
Right.
The machine will progress along there. I think we can possibly make it progress along this plank, so it isn't quite a fair test because it hasn't got any, it isn't really wide enough, but I mean, basically it will go along like this.
Right. Oh, looking promising. Yeah, it's pretty good.
And there would be certain offensive devices and defensive devices fitted onto it.
And you've got some sort of gear ratio on that wheel so that it pulls more easily, is that right?
No, no, it's not pulled more easily. I think it would be a fallacy, I think, which initially, apart from Michael, we all fell into, that if the string was merely wrapped around this diameter, of course, pulling it to go, making it go forward, you're applying the same pull to drag it backwards. You wouldn't get anywhere.
Right.
So it's only by having a relatively large gear ratio that the pull on here is appreciably less than the force which is trying to advance the machine, and only then can you make progress.
Okay, well, it looks good for getting to the middle, Michael, and actually staying there, but then how are you going to knock the competition over?
We're still thinking desperately to try and find some way we think will work. We thought of swinging arms. We thought of a ram to lever up the opposite one on one side, but we think that would work, but wouldn't go far enough.
Really?
And so we're still hoping for a last-minute inspiration, but we must arm it somehow. The other thing is that we shall have defences in the form of balloons stuck around it, which may help to fend off any opposing blows, you see.
Well, in fact, bounce the opposition off.
Right.
They're turning almost all the energy back into their own machine.
Looks as though they're in for a tough time. Well, listen,
I don't know. Let's get it going there.
Well, you've got to think of that idea for knocking them off. I think you've got about an hour looking at the way that the tide's creeping up around us at the moment, so I'll leave you to it to carry on the good work.
Righto, chaps.
Right.
Well,
I'm a bit concerned about this, actually. I think we're going to have... Well, I don't know. Do what? Yes, I suppose.
Well, we must now make some washers. The whole thing now depends on getting the whole thing...
Let's make some washers and let's make some guides. We want at
some
least
washers,
the traction
guides,
to
and
work.
then a bloody great ram, chaps.
Picked yourself a good spot here, Meredith.
Yes.
Very pleasant. Well, I must say, as a complete non-engineer, I'm very impressed with the inventive minds of our teams. What do you think of the overall standard?
Oh, yes, I agree. I think they're very inventive. There are 3 problems here, and some of them have concentrated more on one of the 3. The 3 problems are, first of all, how you push it along from standing at the back end, and that's quite a problem. Secondly, how you make it ride stably on a round thing, which is quite a tricky thing to do. And they've mostly gone for that kind of solution. And thirdly, how you knock the other fellow off.
At the moment, they've all done that to various lesser or greater degrees. If you had to put your money on the contest at the moment, which one would it go on very quickly?
Well, I think both the red and the yellow have been more successful in balancing all three problems than the other two teams when I last saw them, but they may have gone
Well, they might indeed, because the time continues, and if you look out to the tide, you'll see that now all our rigs are completely covered, and the red team have abandoned ship, as it were. Let's have a look in detail at their efforts then, Meredith.
Well, they had a very simple way of pushing it. They just push it with two rods, but they've made use of that two rods to work a paddle device so that, with a lever, so that they can knock the other fellow off by moving them differentially, which seemed to me very ingenious.
OK, let's move on to yellow, who seem to be doing reasonably well. What's theirs? Theirs is very simple, isn't it?
Yes, yellow have used the principle of a cylinder, a broom handle or something, with nails on it, and then having a pulley at the end to drive it. So that you get a leverage, because you've got to pull backwards on your string, and yet you want to make the thing go forward. So you need a leverage which gives you more force forward than the pull backwards. And they've got a very ingenious way of knocking the other person by lifting them up with levers, which may or may not work.
We shall see. That spiked rod has been very popular, hasn't it, as a form of getting it along the pole?
Yes, the grey team have also got
right.
that.
Well, first of all, let's look at the blue team, and theirs, I think, is the most sophisticated design, isn't it? And having problems, I think, at the moment.
Yes, they realised the method of walking, which you can do if you have something going backwards and forwards, and it grips on the backward movement and slides on the forward movement, then it gradually takes the system forward. This is called a walking beam system, and they've tried to do that with back-pointing nails. It's very ingenious the way they've done it, but it's one of these things that requires a great deal of experimental work, and I just don't think they've got time to get it to work.
Exactly. There's been quite a pressure of time on all the teams, and it's amazing that they've come up with anything at all. Theirs is particularly robust and looks the part as well. But we shall see. And finally, our professors, of course, our fourth team, and they are abandoning ship even as we speak. There goes Heinz. What are their chances, do you think?
Well, they certainly grasped the method of propulsion, similar to that of the yellow team, but with a much bigger pulley, so that they get a really good leverage effect and nails in the system. But when I last saw them, they hadn't really solved the problems of stability or of knocking the other fellow out. They may have done it by now, I don't know.
They've done all the basics, but
yes.
Number 3, the knocking off, they haven't thought about. Well, they are experts and they're professionals, and I'm sure they'll come up with something rather interesting. Well, the tide's coming in, and also our audience are gathering, so they don't have very much time left before the big competition. Well, time has finally run out, so let battle commence. Now remember, there are 3 bouts. The winners of the first 2 bouts will face each other in the final one. Now, Meredith, what's the scoring system?
Well, it's extremely simple. If one knocks the other off it and doesn't fall off itself, it wins. But if there's a draw, then we have to decide which of the 2 was the most ingenious.
OK. Well, let's get straight on with it. The first 2 teams are red versus blue. Are you ready, teams? Then off you go!
Fall down.
And red seems to be doing quite well, getting into the middle very quickly, and it's battling away. That arm swinging round, and blue having a swipe, and oh, red nearly went down. Red seems to be listing dangerously at 90 degrees. In fact, there's nothing that blue can do now to... They've righted it somehow. They're still battling red, hanging off a grim death, and that seems to be it. Yes, blue the winner. Very clear and emphatic victory by blue. In fact, we were quite surprised by that, weren't we?
Yes, I was surprised because they'd introduced at the last minute a very ingenious idea of cutting a string when it got into position and so jamming itself firmly on the bar.
We'll see if it succeeds for them again later, but now on to round 2, and it's the yellows versus the greys. Are you ready, teams? Yes. Off you go!
Go on, John. Lift. Go on, John.
Yellow and grey meet in the middle. Seems to be stalemate at the moment. Difficult to see what's going on.
Push
Yellow
it.
trying to lever the grey machine up and off that beam. And it seems to be moving, certainly. There's a bit of leverage, and that's up it goes, but no, not quite. Not a lot of offensive ploy yet by the grey machine. Can't see how they're expecting to knock the yellow off the beam. Looks like stalemate at the moment. Neither of the offensive weapons are particularly good on these machines, I don't think. There's not much... Oh, but yellow's in trouble. I don't know how that's happened, actually. I think that's more of a design fault on the yellow's side more than an offensive blow from grey, but certainly yellow now at 90 degrees and not looking too well. But having said that, and the pole comes in. Ian Fells brings in the long pole to try and push things along, and yellow now, I think, about to go under. And great effort. It doesn't want to die. Okay, I think we're going to have to claim stalemate there. Round of applause for them both. Stalemate there, tricky one, but we've actually gone for the judges. Why is that?
Well, the yellow team was knocked further over, and they also gave rather unfair assistance by means of their rods. So I think it was the right decision.
It's fair. Okay, so into the third and final round we go. It is blue versus the judges. Are you ready, teams? Off you go! And once again, blue making good headway into the centre to combat with this rather mean-looking judges' contraption. They're now within striking distance of each other. Those balloons looking rather less than menacing. And this wire pole with the blue flags on is supposed to hit the grey machine at some point and knock it over, but in fact there aren't many places it can reach. It's a little higher. It's trying to knock one of the balloons, but I don't think that's going to get them too far. They're desperately pulling strings at this end. Oh, and that's an interesting development. The blue now listing heavily as the the grey machine just tramples over them, but now being lifted. There's an awful lot of footwork going. Oh, and there goes one balloon, lifted but not felled. Grey machine still on course, and this is a good tussle. Going for that yellow balloon, and it definitely is a defensive machine.
Because they put their vertical piece so far back that the other people can't reach it.
Right. Crafty. Crafty. And in fact, the blue might be hoisted by their own petard as they're trying so hard. They look as if... Oh, but there! What about that? And the final second. The Professor's machine well and truly dipped. Well, congratulations to the blue team and commiserations to our valiant losers. And thank you very much, Professor Meredith Thring, for being our guest judge today. Have you enjoyed yourself?
I've enjoyed very much because it's such an ingenious problem.
It was indeed. And I've enjoyed myself too. Thank you very much for the people of Brancaster in Norfolk for turning up. Now, next week, Heinz will be given his old job back, and there'll be another semi-final in Scotland. So join the egg race next week. Goodbye.